Infernal blessings. We are back with another video. All right, before we begin, a couple quick announcements. So we are in the stretch drive. This is your last week to sign up for the 7th annual journey of the Black Adept Conference. You can attend live and in person. It's going to begin this Thursday, October 35th. I'm adding 4 days to a month that doesn't exist. October 31st on Halloween night with a graveyard ritual to open up the conference, followed by a meet and greet at Dandy Donut. That'll kick off the conference. Friday and Saturday we have classes and presentations and workshops from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then Friday and Saturday we come back and convene in the evening with a group ritual in both evenings, followed by a group dinner. And then Sunday, I finish out the conference with a question and answer class from noon to 4 p.m. All right. Having said that, you can sign up or attend live and in person here in Hollywood, Florida, which is in the Fort Lauderdale area, or you can attend virtually. If you want to sign up, shoot me an email, khnum19@gmail.com, and I will send you information on how to do that. Also, if you are interested in a spiritual reading or a spiritual consultation, I offer various different types of readings. Klapothic demonic readings, Santa Muerte readings, Egyptian oracle readings, shadow work readings, which is a great reading to do to kind of see where you stand, to kind of see what's going on currently around you in your life at the moment, which also points you in the right direction of what it is I should be working on ritualistically, because people always ask that question: what should I be working on ritualistically if you're not sure? Shadow work reading is a great reading to do to determine that. Deity readings to see what gods, goddesses, demons, and archetypes walk with you to further your strength and connection with those energies on the path of the occult or the left-hand path. Or maybe you're just interested in a spiritual consultation, which many people do. They reach out to me because they just got a bunch of questions they want to ask. They got questions about the path, different magical systems or spiritual systems, or maybe they want to focus on a specific area in their life or a specific area in the path. You can use it for whatever you decide. All right. If you're interested in any of the aforementioned, shoot me an email, khnum19@gmail.com. All right. Also, if you want to sign up for classes, go to the Primordial Chaos Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti, tier 3. That's the tier you want to join. That gives you access to the 3 private classes I do every month on Patreon, including the group ritual at the end of the month. If you go to the page and go to the collection sections, you will see all the currently ongoing classes that are happening right now, with new classes being added on a regular basis. Okay? Again, tier 3, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti, tier 3. That's the tier you want to join. Don't forget to check out all the social media pages. Primordial Chaos 9, one word, on Instagram. Primordial Chaos, 2 words, on Facebook. Primordial Chaos .3. I always fuck that one out. Anyway, Primordial Chaos 3 on TikTok. Those are the best places to stay up to date and current on what it is I am doing, classes, announcements, things that we got going on the path. Stay abreast of the social media pages. Also, don't forget to check out the Primordial Chaos podcast, available on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. The direct link to the podcast, my contact email address, the social media pages, and the Primordial Chaos Patreon page to sign up for classes. All of that is in the description box of this video that you are watching right now. You see the title. I wanted to touch a little bit base on this. Something, in my opinion, that is not talked about enough in Egypt, how it is really focused and centered on necromancy, sorcery, and magic. Okay? Mainstream Kemetic information is more right-hand path philosophy. It's the standard stuff you find in most major books. It's a lot of historical data, right? It's a lot of history, things of that nature that fall more in alignment with right-hand path philosophy, which, look, there's nothing wrong with that, but we're looking to dig deeper in things, right? As occultists, left-hand path practitioners, we're looking, as they say, we're looking to get into the meat of things, right? To the core of things. Egypt at its core is about necromancy, sorcery, and magic, right? Even if you look in your modern day Bible, your biblical scriptures, you take the story for an example of when Moses comes before the Pharaoh. Remember, the biblical God plays games. Who shall I say sent me? I am that I am. That's a story for a whole nother time. But he goes before Pharaoh, right? And Moses, as we know, as the story, I'm saying according to the story, was so-called raised in Egypt. His name, Moshe, Musa, Moses, Thutmose in Egypt, means he who was drawn forth. And drawn forth because, as we know the story, they get the Hebrew name or title because he was drawn from the water, right? And according to the biblical story, he was raised in Egypt amongst Egyptians, which means what? One, he had to look just like them so he didn't stand out. Because as we remember, his mother puts him in the, according to the story, I just want to make that clear, puts him in the basket in the water, because remember, the Egyptians were, according to the story, going around sacrificing at that time all the Israelite so-called, or who they thought all the Israelite, after Moses' revolt, thinking that they would, alleviate the problem. So his mother throws him in the Nile, and we know he is found by Pharaoh's wife. He's raised in Pharaoh's house, just giving you the quick version. And which confirms, according to the story, he's raised amongst Egyptians. He learned the Egyptian sciences, etc. So after the revolt, after he kills one of his Egyptian brothers, protecting, quote unquote, his Israelite seed, he flees, right? And then we see how, according to the story, his call to prophethood happens in the story. But anyway, as he's sent back into Egypt by I am that I am, he casts down his staff and it turns into a serpent. And the pharaohs and the Egyptians, who all practice magic and sorcery, like, that ain't shit. They cast down their serpent, right? We see one of many instances where anytime something went wrong, individuals either fled to Egypt for food, clothing, and shelter, or for some type of mystical teaching, initiation, wisdom, or gaining some magical practice, right? We see this even as you speed up into the time of the New Testament with Jesus, and I'm going to shift off of this in a minute, but I'm just trying to show you from modern day on back. We see Jesus spent majority of his life in Egypt, because we see he comes back into the temples in Jerusalem at 12, and he is mystifying the Pharisees and the Sadducees with the knowledge he has obtained. We see then he disappears again and returns, according to the biblical stories, at age 30 for his 3-year ministry, after so-called them being crucified, dying, resurrection. Is this an Egyptian mystery? What is this symbolic of? But we see he was schooled, educated, and learned the sacred sciences in Egypt. Well, what one was called miracles in the biblical lands was something that in ancient Egypt was done as a regular daily practice by a high priest or elder who had mastered themselves and raised them up to a certain level of consciousness and awareness. Okay? So that's just a quick summarization when you look in your modern day Bible to see the connection with Egypt. And really, if you take ancient Egypt out of the modern day Bible, there's not a lot you can really prove in there. Really, ancient Egypt is the only thing that gives the Bible biblical, or gives it some type of validation. Because really, technically, look at it. They have not found the Ark of the Covenant. Where are the 10 Commandments? Where is Noah's Ark? Right? They haven't even confirmed all the burial sites of the so-called biblical prophets. Okay, the list goes on and on. You take Egypt out of the equation, and as I said before, the story of Moses and Pharaoh Ramses II, the timelines don't match up. If you look at the timeline of the biblical Moses and the timeline of Pharaoh Ramses II, they couldn't be. It would be impossible. right? That's just basic common fucking sense, but people act like they don't see it and they ignore it. Anyway, let's back up now. Let's go back to ancient Egypt. Also know a lot of the information taught on Egypt, you're getting a lot of information based on the last 46 dynasties, which were the Hyksos dynasties, which were a combination of your Greek, your Turks, your Indo-Aryan people who came into Egypt and mixed in with the ancient Nubians or ancient Egyptians. As I've mentioned many times before, the ancient Egyptians migrated into Egypt from what's now known as Aswan or Sudan or Nubia back in the day. And these were your dark brown-skinned African Egyptians, right? It's just fact, okay? You'll see in Aswan, Nile, Sudan area, there's more pyramids in ancient Nubia than there are in ancient Egypt itself. And that's why the culture was brought down from what's called Nubia or Aswan area into what we now today know along the Nile as ancient Egypt. So when you go back into the information of the pre-dynastic Egyptians, especially with understanding Satuk and Set, who is the mask of the adversary on our path when we're dealing with the Egyptian Heka, and we're dealing with who would the adversary be in ancient Egypt, it's Set. He was the most unique deity in ancient Egypt for a multitude of reasons. So when you look at ancient Egypt, you look at the pharaohs, you look at some of the great deities such as Ampu, Anubis, and Set. You look at what they're falsely calling the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is the coming forth by day. As I've told you guys many times before, that is a magical scroll dealing with spells, magic, and sorcery. I know some individuals present it like it's some Egyptian biblical text. It's not. If you've read it, you'll see it's about casting spells, protection, going into the underworld, the void, the abyss. This is why there's many places in the coming forth by day where you're supposed to insert your name. There's always a lot of these blanks, right? If you're reading the text and you understand the text, it's a book of magic and sorcery and necromancy, okay? And I don't know why this is not discussed enough. When you look at Egypt as a whole, it was a land of magic, okay? They were tapped into the divine source, whatever you want to call it, the adversary, the creator, whatever floats your boat. The fact of the matter is they were tapped in, okay? And it's all in the text. There's things, for an example, in the pyramid text, where where Ptah says he brought himself into existence. Esoterically, what does that mean? Okay? When it says you're a self-created being, what does that mean? We can look at that literally or esoterically. Self-created being is one who acknowledges themselves or looks for the creator within themselves and realizes that they are God or goddess in the sense that they have sovereignty over their spiritual self, that they are tapped in to spiritual powers that are beyond three-dimensional person, place, or thing. You're talking about great magicians, great sorcerers, right? The Greek word that we use all the time, pharaoh or Faroon, means lighthouse. Go look it up. Why would they call pharaoh and attribute a term to a person lighthouse? Lighthouse for what? Right? The light we're talking about is the intellect. And the reason why they wear those certain headdresses that you see the pharaoh wear, just like the pyramid. No, when you see the pyramids, even below the ground, the pyramid goes down the same way you see it going up above ground. If you bring them together and merge them together, you've got what you call a six-pointed star. Which, as I told you, the six-pointed star goes back to Egypt, on back to ancient Samaria and ancient Babylon. During the times of it's found in the temples of Hammurabi. You'll read the stories when the so-called Jews made the exodus from Babylon or ancient Samaria back into Jerusalem to rebuild Solomon's temple. During the times, if you read the books of Ezra, you'll see this is when they started to compile the Torah. This is where they brought a lot of that Sumerian doctrine, especially the stories of creation, the six-pointed star, which you see in those temples, they brought that culture back into what we knew as Jerusalem. Now keep in mind, the captivity at that period in Babylon wasn't the captivity that people think it was. A lot of so-called people that were in captivity stayed because they had a great life there. Not all went back into Jerusalem, according to the historical stories, with the man known as Ezra. Okay, so now we see the graftation of how this culture was adopted. And this is why when you're looking at Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you're seeing an infusion of a lot of ancient Egyptian concepts. The same thing with the Muslims' prayer called Salah. It's not in its entirety in the Quran, each position. Now, it's in the Hadith, and some Muslims will tell you, oh, well, we get all the positions of our prayer from the Hadith. But the Hadith is what's called tales of men, oral traditions. It's like the Jews' Talmud. That's their Hadith. Because the Jews claim while Moses was at the top of Mount Sinai receiving the Torah or the law, there were a bunch of elders at the bottom of the mountain receiving the oral law. It's all mythology, can't be proven. The Muslims have the same thing. But is it a coincidence that in ancient Egypt, on the walls, literally on the walls of the pyramids, you could see each position of the prayer system that the Muslims call Salah? So, and the Muslims base their 5 prayers, really 7 to 9 counting the Sunnah prayers, but their 5 obligatory daily prayers on the movement of the sun. We know the sun deity is connected to Ra, right? And we see they make their prayer in accordance to the movement of the sun. Is this not an ancient Egyptian concept dealing with some higher form of esoterical spiritual understanding? I'm just saying, okay? If you can find each of those positions of their salat on the walls in ancient Egypt, you can't find it in their Quran. You can only find it in some hadith. Where did they get it from? My point being is, the 3 major world monotheistic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, really their foundation is based on ancient Egyptian teachings, whether you're aware of it or not. Okay? And when you look at the teachings of ancient Egypt, it's about self-mastery, the occult. Everything that we identify with today on the left-hand path is what true ancient Egyptian teachings and wisdom are all about. So why are we not being taught the sacred sciences of magic and sorcery and necromancy to master ourselves? Why is it promoted as such taboo? That's evil. That's negative. No, it's not. Ampu, Anubis, one of the most revered deities in ancient Egypt, on both sides of the spectrum, the right-hand path and the left-hand path, is utilized strong in people's spiritual practices. But why are those who practice right-hand path philosophy and connect with Anubis on that level, why do they act like the elements of necromancy don't exist? Not talking about in a very simplistic form, but Ampu is a very, I don't want to say complex deity, but a very intense spiritual archetype of spirit to work with, because he deals with high levels of spiritual transformation. And even we know this past weekend, for those at the filming of this video right now, this past Thursday night, we just did a ritual with his mother, Nephthys, which we know her strong connection, right? As we just found out in this month, and especially in the last week, her strong connections to change, darkness, transformation, and necromancy. We know she is the mother of Ampu or Anubis and the consort or mate of Satuk or Set. So this is a unique combination of ancient Egyptian deities when you look at Set, his mate Nephthys, and Ampu and Anubis. And there's always a close tie. Sometimes you see things in reference to Set and Anubis. They can be confused sometimes, especially in imagery, because Set's image sometimes is connected to the jackal, the snout of a boar, or there's just so much mysticism behind Set. He can't completely be identified what animal mask is synonymous with his nature or energy. It's just speculation. It's so many different things. It's just raw chaos, which Set is about, but not because his job is to solely bring chaos in your life and destroy and consume you, but he brings the chaos up that exists within you so you can devour and master it. Now, it becomes chaotic and destructive if you allow it to devour you and just sit back and don't do shit about it. So people always, it gets me a little bit amped up because people always try to set off as some negative, destructive deity. Yes, it can be. Depending when you connect with him, he's going to bring it all up to the surface and say, here's what we need to do. Here's what's fucked up about you. Here's what we got to work on and master. And here's what we got to change. You're either going to get down with that program or he's going to say, fuck it. I'm going to start to go to work on it, whether you like it or not. You call me. Hey, I ain't got time for bullshit. Don't call me. Don't waste my time. This is just my connection with Set, how Set communicates with me. Don't bullshit with me. Don't waste my time. I got time for this shit. I could be doing other important things. And then he goes to work. And then some people are ready for it. They embrace it. They get great rewards, amazing change, and their life transforms for the better. But then there's some that don't do shit, not ready for it, underestimate it, and their life goes into pure chaos and turmoil. That's where the devouring aspect, the chaotic and destructive aspect of Set can eat away at you and just destroy every aspect of your being. Okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But this is what ancient Egypt is really all about. Okay? And the lesser religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, just grafted from it what they could water down and came up with what you see today as modern day monotheistic religions. Islam, Christianity, Judaism. Okay? Don't get it twisted, folks. Ancient Egypt is a land shrouded in magic, necromancy, sorcery, you name it, right? The title itself, which I don't like to use it because it's a more modern day term, that's why I say that. When people refer to it as Kemet, right? Chem or Ham, it's still, you shouldn't call it that because that comes from the Hebrew language. Chem or Chem, right, is just black. So when you're saying Kemet, you're saying the land of the blacks or black land, Kemet. But I wouldn't say that's the name because historically it wasn't its true name because that ties you back into biblical times. The English word we use for chemist, chemist, what does a chemist do? Chemist technically is a magician. It messes with scientific elements to create results, to get a greater understanding of things through science. Is not a chemist, or the Greek word pharmacist or pharmaceutical. Pharmacist has root in the word sorcery. The English word chemist has root in the word chem or cam, right? And chemistry. Why did they take that word and connect it? Is it a coincidence? Absolutely not. Because both of those words, pharmacy and chemistry, have roots in Egypt and magic and sorcery when you start to dig and probe. Okay? Not a coincidence. Okay? So are we not chemists, magicians, sorcerers, doing scientific experiments, working on ourselves, and just like scientists do, some things are going to work and some things aren't going to work, right? That's the nature of what we do. But we have to experiment to figure that out. That's what magicians did. That's what the ancient Egyptians did. They came up through those practices with the solutions and the formulas on how to master themselves. And they came to the realization of what we call in the spiritual world that it's not what we thought it was, that there's a thin veil between the two. And they knew by tapping into their magical powers, they would be able to connect the two. And this is why you always hear me say, don't think that they're separated. They're side by side with each other, and they're kind of interwoven with each other. And as I've told you guys many times before, you are living in a parallel universe side by side with each other. And you're bouncing back and forth between those realms, plural, I should say, universes, plural, right? And they as masters, when they came to that realization, recognized the greatness within themselves and said, look, we're a self-sufficient type of people. Okay? And to sum it off and finish it off, this is why they tried to show you that through the story of the character Jesus in the Bible. Right? Now pay attention, because I'm going to give you some fucking nuggets here. Real simple. If you look, that's why Jesus stands out as the most unique prophet in the Bible. That's why Set stands out as the most unique deity in Egypt. Jesus came back in them stories. Why did they feel it necessary to point out that his doctrine was different from everything prior to it? And they used terms like he had to come to fulfill the law. He came back and reformed everything the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the political structure and religious structure, so-called according to the stories at the time, were teaching, and said, no, you guys got this all fucked up. And they were astonished when he was 12 in the temple teaching, and they were astonished when they ran into him as a grown-ass adult. They didn't understand what is he accused of in the Bible when he performed what they're calling miracles. They said, oh, he must be connected to the devil. He has these powers we can't explain. No, they were just basic powers that any individual has the ability to acquire if they study and master themselves. So I'm trying to show you, they're telling you a mythological story in the Bible, but they're infusing it with some truth. That's why when people talk about Christ consciousness, they don't really know what it's talk. Christ consciousness is a left-hand path concept when you apply it correctly. And this is why I said, was not Jesus on the left-hand path? Because he was a nonconformist. He did everything anti the establishment, anti the religious establishment, anti the political establishment, and anti the cultural establishment. And it all had its root in ancient Egypt. Does not the book of Hosea, the 12th chapter, say, out of Egypt I call my son? What is that referring to? That's referring to when Jesus came back out of Egypt into Jerusalem. Why don't Christians acknowledge that the Savior, who they call the Savior, clearly mentioned in Hosea, was called out of Egypt? Coincidence? I think not. It's important to understand, so you have a greater understanding the teachings and what they're rooted in ancient Egypt. Egypt was a land of magic, sorcery, and necromancy. Is all shrouded in it when you look at the text, when you understand the functioning of the deities. And I'm talking more so the pre-dynastic Egyptians. I'm not talking about the last 46 dynasties and the Hyksos, because they brought a lot of their culture in. I told you the word Egypt has root in the word Egyptos, Greek word, burnt. They called it the land of burnt faces, because when the fair-skinned invaders came in, the sun would burn their skin, their face. So Egypt is a modern day term. It was never called Egypt in ancient times. You have to go back and look at, and not even Alkebulan, because I know some people are going to say that, right? You have to go look at the words Tach, Ma, Re, right? Earth, water, and sun, right? That was one of its ancient names. Tar, or the Tarites, is another term you'll hear amongst the pre-dynastic Egyptians. And then you can go back to the word, it had a word in North, or what we call Nuba, and then into Nubia, N-U-B-I-A, which are terms that predate what we're using now called Egypt, right? And you know me, I don't tell people to stay stuck in historical data, but this is important to understand in this point when we're connecting Egypt to the occult, the left-hand path, and the path of self-mastery. It is important for us, not so much to get into some debate and argument with nonsensical people over some nonsense and bullshit, but it's important for us. All right? So hopefully this short tutorial was informative for you, helped you out, and gave you a greater understanding of what the occult, left-hand path, and ancient Egypt are all about. All right? That's all I got for you. Again, if you need to reach out to me for a reading or a consultation, or you want to sign up for classes, the direct link to the podcast also. So that link to the podcast, the direct link to all the social media pages, my contact email address, the direct link to the Primordial Chaos Patreon page to sign up for classes. All that's in the description box of the video that you're watching right now. All right? Other than that, I'm out of here. Infernal blessings, and we will talk soon.